So, welcome to this week's episode of Work the Left Side. We are starting 1PW month with my pick, who I have made it very public, and because I think the guy's awesome, your future 1PW champion, Mr. Mark Haskins, the Overkill. How's it going, dude?
It's going great, man. Yeah, can't complain. Even though we find, ways to complain anyway. How about you?
Well, we won't do that here. This is a happy place. So we will focus on the good stuff that's coming up. Obviously, anybody wrestling knows 1PW's back. Had the pleasure of watching yourself against RVD and Rhino. Two hardcore icons. Seems like you're on a mission to destroy the hardcore legacy.
Oh, absolutely, man. These are guys who I grew up idolizing. I loved ECW when I was a young wrestling fan many, many years ago now. And it's, I don't know, it's such a cool experience anytime that you're in the ring with somebody who you grew up watching, who you grew up idolizing, and guys like Rhino, guys like Rob Van Dam. I was a huge Rob Van Dam fan when I was a kid. I loved Rhino. I thought all these guys were great. So get a chance, especially now that I feel like I'm coming into my prime of my wrestling career, being able to get into the ring with them. It's an absolute honor, and it's a great opportunity to beat up some old guys while they're still around.
But I was going to ask you, obviously, I don't know how far back your wrestling interest goes. Also, I remember, back in the day when 1PW originally started, you were just a young, scally-faced chav, whether, you did watch ECW back in the day. It's
a different life right now, isn't it, mate? It's, feels like a completely different life. Like it was, funnily enough, I never really got officially booked for 1PW. What happened was it was literally, I think it was probably my fourth match, right? So I'd been training for 3 years. I left college in June of 2006, and I decided, I was like, right, I got to start my wrestling career. That was my next goal, and I was like, I got to do this. And then 2 days later, I got told that I was going to be having my first match a month down the line, right? And then it's weird how the planets kind of align like this. And Dan James, who was the head of the Chav group at the time, he got injured the same show that I debuted. So he had these bookings lined up with 1PW, and his tag partner, a guy called Harry Mills, I remember he said to me, I think the week before, he was like, do you want to wrestle at 1PW this weekend? And I was like, well, of course I do. Like 1PW at that point, I think it was coming up to its 1 year anniversary, and it was a huge deal. I remember their first show was, scheduled to have Matt Hardy on. Like they were bringing in these, huge names, like guys that were, super hot on the indies at the time. Like this is a time when, you had like guys like AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, like headlining TNA events, and they're coming over here and wrestling for 1PW. So it was it was a huge deal. And I remember Harry said to me, he was like, come with me. He was like, what are you up to this weekend? I was like, nothing. He was like, come with me to the show and I will get you booked. And I was like, there's no way this is happening, but I would rather find out that like it couldn't happen than sit at home and wonder if it ever would. So I packed my bags. I went to the show. My trainer hadn't spoken to me about it. He didn't, nobody had really got me this booking. Harry was like, put your gear on and we'll go and speak to Steve Corino, who was the booker at the time. And I was a huge fan of Corino's, right? I remember back in the day, like, I somehow ended up with his AOL instant messenger, profile or whatever, like, would send him messages as just an avid fan. And then suddenly I'm walking up to the guy and he's now essentially my boss, right? And he asks Harry, he says, who's your tag partner? And he points at me and he says, that guy. He's like, all right, cool. You guys are on dark match, have a good one, basically. And within like an hour or so, we're walking it out in front of 1,500, 2,000 fans. And that was really how I just kind of got my start. And then from that point on, they kept offering me more and more dates. And it wasn't like anything that officially happened. Like it was a complete, I literally stumbled into it and somehow ended up, being one of the, the main tag teams there in 1PW. It was such a bizarre experience, and I was really just counting my lucky stars, and like I said, like the guys who were coming over at that time, it was surreal. Like, we're within the first couple of months of my wrestling career, I'm in dressing rooms with guys like, like I said, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, Steve Corino, Abyss, like all these, guys who have got like huge names, huge reputations, and incredible talent. And it was just such this just bizarre scenario where it happened almost completely by accident, and somehow that's now paid off, all these years later, where it's funny, everybody remembers me in the early days of being this chav, and now I'm as far from that as you could possibly imagine. And it's I don't know, man. Like the longer I'm alive, the weirder life gets. You know what I mean? Like if you told me like a year ago, like, coming back from the pandemic, for example, like, 1PW would be back, I'd be like, nah, there's no way. Like, I don't know what you've been smoking, but that's, not going to happen. And then sure enough, I'm main eventing the first show back against my idol, Rob Van Dam. It's insane. It's bizarre. And it's I don't know. It's a hell of a roller coaster ride to be a part of, man.
Dude, sounds awesome. Was it, obviously, like say, man, early doors in your career, was it really intimidating? Did you pluck up the courage? Did you sort of, is it, true what they say, you have to go around and shake everybody's hands as like a show of respect, all that kind of sort of stuff? Did you?
Yeah, like, well, everybody, it's important to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's important to go around and, introduce yourself and, say hello to people and have some kind of integrity with your work, right? And within your workplace. You can kind of feel though sometimes that you're more of a nuisance than like, because a lot of these guys are, high profile stars, and you kind of feel, awkward. I remember there was a show where Dustin Rhodes, right? He was getting geared up to be Goldust, and I come out of the bathroom. I think this was the first time I saw him, and he's using the only sink, and I'm like, excuse me, sir, can I just use the sink real quick? And and then you're like, hi, I'm Mark, by the way, and it can be awkward, but he was very lovely. He was very kind and polite, and but it is daunting. Like I was saying, like a few months before, you're just dreaming about, oh man, like it'd be amazing if I could be on the same shows as these guys, and then suddenly that's your reality, and you're like, what the hell has happened? What have I conjured here that has allowed the planets to align and given me this great opportunity? But like I said, man, it's just so bizarre how the real world works. You can anticipate whatever it is that you want to anticipate, and you can worry about whatever you want to worry about. 9 times out of 10, your worries never accumulate to anything, and somehow something even more bizarre ends up being the reality.
But like I said, you couldn't have made that up 3 months into your career. Posh, you're in like one of the biggest promotions in the UK at the time. Like I say, working side by side with. I used to go. I remember seeing like Curryman versus Goldust, which is obviously the show you just mentioned. The triple threat between Samoa Joe, AJ, and Daniels, basically redoing the match that was getting 5-star reviews all over the world from TNA. It was a mental time to be a wrestling fan and to be a wrestler. I can only imagine, like I said, being in the locker room. So, and it's just nice to know that the Chav thing was just a phase. You can't.
Make take your starts where you can. It's and it's always funny to look back at the start of my career. I was like, there's going to be no point in my career where I look back and feel embarrassed, and then here I am 16 years deep thinking, there's so much I'm embarrassed by. But I don't know, I guess that's part of the fun of the journey.
Yes. On the Rhino match, I brought my oldest to Lincoln, and he basically, as soon as he saw Rhino, he was like, the guy's the definition of a brick shithouse. I can imagine how solid he is.
Also, he's huge. he's a solid lug. Like, I looked at him and I was like, gosh, what am I gonna do? Do you know what I mean? Like, he's a big, thick old boy. And which is mad as well, because he's not incredibly taller than me. He's like maybe 6 foot, 6'1", but I don't know what they fed him. Maybe they just fed him cinder blocks for breakfast. But he's jacked, man. He's solid.
So can't even imagine the gore. Was that sort of like, obviously, you know, you got to take it. You think, okay, it's a spear, it's a gore. You've taken them before, but then obviously you see the guy, and you're just like, shit. It's gonna hurt a little bit.
Amazing thing, you know, is, you know, when the adrenaline's up and when the crowd are responding, you know, you feel it, but it doesn't bother you so much. That was something that during the pandemic you really realized. If you took a bump and heard no reaction, you just felt the life like drain out of you, and you're like, oh, why am I doing this? You know. So yeah, it cannot be, you know, stated enough how vital a a loud and excited crowd is vital to any show. You know, it makes our jobs a lot more enjoyable, and it makes, you know, us a lot more capable if there's people there that are buzzing and loving, you know, what we're doing.
Yeah, so it's true then, you do legitimately sort of feed off the audience. You know, you get that buzz from it. You know, the electricity helps you guys do what you do, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I can tell you that from working in front of a lot of audiences where they don't respond. You just feel so like, oh, like it feels like you're being just drained of life and energy, you know. If you're in front of an audience where everybody's buzzing and loving it, and then, you know, involved, you know, emotionally every step of the way, fantastic. Such a huge difference, you know. And it's 100%. Like I genuinely believe that, you know, we don't fully understand, for the most part, humans don't fully understand how much you know, we can kind of live off of each other's energy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it sounds kind of weird, but you know, if you talk to somebody who's fun and engaging and exciting, you can come away and you can feel like, you know, you've just had, like, you know, a crate of energy drinks. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, like, if you talk to somebody that just kind of talks like this, and like, yeah, like my maths teacher at school made me think that I hated maths. Do you know what I mean? But you know, because he would talk like this, and it just drained the life out of you. And like, you know, I'd be falling asleep in his lessons, and then I'd get terrible grades. You know what I mean? But people, if you've got high energy, then you can live off of that, and it's you know, it does a lot. It goes a long way, I'll tell you that much.
Definitely agree with that. I sort of like, yeah, you know, try to surround yourself with people who big you up rather than bring you down, in the sense of the positive energy. Totally get what you mean by just, it kind of, we're like magnets where you either pull the positive or you pull the negative energy out of people around you, and it affects your mood, it affects just your general outlook on life and stuff. So yeah, totally get that. But key lesson from this one though is, yes, be positive, get positive people around you, and you'll just get a happy energy. And just,
yeah, absolutely. And like, we live in such an awesome time as well, you know. Like, if you can there's a saying that you become a sum of the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most, right? So it's important for you to figure out what 5 people you want to most be like, and then, you know, surround yourself with them. And I think that can also stem as well to, you know, you don't even necessarily have to know those people. You know, like, there's people that I follow on, say, social media, on you know, I search for their videos on YouTube, like voices that inspire me, that, you know, voices that make me want to be a better version of myself. So I'll listen to people like, you know, Eric Thomas, the hip hop preacher, you know, guys like CT Fletcher, you know, guys like David Goggins, who all, when they talk, there's an energy to them that rubs off on you and makes you want to, you know, it makes you motivated. It makes you want to do better. It makes you want to be better. And I think that's important to do, you know, like, you have to be able to surround yourself with these kind of voices that are going to, you know, rub off on you on the right way and put you on the right tracks. You know, like, if you're, you know, misery loves company, and if you sit around and you bitch and you moan, right, you're just wasting time. You're wasting energy that you could be spending investing in creating a better situation, so you don't have to bitch and moan about things, you know. But too often it's, people would rather, you know, people would rather, pull almost like the victim card and be like, oh, my life's terrible because of this. And there's a quote that I heard recently, which I thought was great, which was, don't focus on the pages of the book of your life that have already been written. Focus on the blank pages and where you're going to go and what you're going to write on those things, because it's never too late to turn your life around. Like a lot of the time now, I feel like, well, I'm 34, like I feel horrendously old in a wrestling environment. I was in a locker room last night where I overheard we were sat around the monitor watching a match, and they said that one of the guys in the match was like 20 years old or something. And then suddenly I did the math. I was like, I started training 20 years ago. The same year that kid was born, I started training to be a pro wrestler. I was like, gosh, I'm so old now. Like I've been wrestling 16 years. My wrestling career is ready to take its GCSEs. Do you know what I mean? Like it's, when you actually start doing the math, you're like, gosh, you feel horrendously old, but then you forget in the grand scheme of things, you're like, oh, you're 34. You've still got the majority of your life in front of you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like stop, freaking out and putting so much pressure on yourself, I think that you've just got to focus on where it is that you want to go. It's never too late to turn things around, like look at somebody like, I think DDP, right? He only started wrestling when he was in his like 40s or something like that.
41, 42, something like that one, yeah.
Yeah, and he became a huge name. Do you know what I mean? Like, Batista was a similar thing. He was like, much older and, gone to the business. The Sandman's another one. Like, it's, you can turn your life around, like, who is it? I've totally forgotten his name. Colonel whatever, KFC, that guy. He only created KFC when he was, in his 60s or 70s, and it's now one of the most, successful companies ever. And it's like, well, just don't let that fire like go out. Do you know what I mean? Like there's always time for you to turn your life around. There's always time for you to do better. Just don't let what's happened to you in the past, like the past, you can't change the past. The past doesn't exist anymore. Some stuff happened to you. That's it. It's gone. Like you've learned your lesson from it. You've learned something from it at least. Don't let that be the weight that holds you back from succeeding or changing your life or living a happier existence.
Yeah, exactly. The quote there about KFC stuff. I think one of my exes, Myvoff, has got a sports massage, sports therapy shop where we live, and getting down a little bit, like building up clientele, building up the business. And one of my mates said to me, he's like, look, key thing is, I think Coca-Cola sold 3 cans of Coke in the first year of business. Just start, it starts slow. You just keep building, stay positive, and just do what you do, and just make the changes you need to make, and concentrate on making it work. And I think that applies to obviously a lot of stuff. So you're all about positive people. You generally don't get any more positive than DDP. Although if you do, like, if you've ever checked out the DDP yoga, or there's a documentary of him on Prime. And yeah, his outlook on life, and it's just the way that he gritted down to make DDP yoga a success is inspiring. I would say it's well worth checking out if you want a nice, happy, feel good story.
Yeah, absolutely. I did DDP yoga. I haven't done it for a few years, but I remember doing it, and just the way that he taught it was it always kind of made me chuckle, because I was thinking like, oh, yoga's usually for like middle-aged housewives or whatever, and then you've got this really intense wrestler being like, hold superstar pose, and it's like, I don't know, it made me chuckle, but it was great. Like I enjoyed doing it, and I think that's the thing, is like, away from wrestling, I'm a qualified personal trainer, and I get asked a lot, like, what's the correct route to do things? Like, is there a particular diet? Is there a particular training method? And the most important thing, in my mind at least, is what is most sustainable to you, right? Yeah. Like, what is it that you can do the longest? Because you can jump on a diet and you can do it for say 6 to 12 weeks and you can lose the weight that you want to lose, but once you reach that point, if you go back to the habits that you had before, you're going to go back to the way that you were before, right? So it's not necessarily about a quick fix and then that being sorted. It's about sustainability. Like, what is it that you can do that you can do for the long run, So, and that's different for everybody, because it comes down to your relationship with food, how you feel about it, and that's the most important thing is, what is it that is going to be the longest, what has the most future in it, Do you know what I mean? Like, my wife and I, we went vegan a few years ago, and then sort of during in 2020, she decided she wanted fish and chips for her birthday, just as like a little treat. And as soon as we had it, I was like, gosh, I forgot how like miserable I was, like, not eating meat. Do you know what I mean? I ordered 21 Domino's Frank's hot sauce wings, to be delivered that night. I was like, man, I love this. And we did some intolerance tests as well and realized, like, oh, I'm intolerant to barley and wheat. And like, so all of the foods that I can eat, I'm eradicating from my diet in favor of foods that are actually making me feel worse. So I was like, well, I've got to switch things up. Do you know what I mean? And I'm back in the food chain now, man. So I'm happier for it. Like going out to America as well. It was rough because there wasn't really a lot of vegan options out there. So it was like fries and a salad every night. And it's like, oh, it just makes you feel miserable. Do you know what I mean? And I think that everybody's got to just find their own route, man. And, that's going to be different for everybody.
And then not being stubborn enough not to change it if it's not working. Like you sort of said then, like, you could have been really stubborn about the whole vegan thing, regardless of the goodness and the badness of it. Or it's like, no, I've made this decision, I'm sticking to it, as opposed to being smart about it and be like, okay, I made that decision. It wasn't the right one in the long run. Let's change it. Let's do something else, kind of thing.
And that's it. I think you have to apply that mindset to a lot of things, whether it be business, whether it be career, whether it be your personal life, you have to try things out and you have to see, okay, well, I like this aspect of something, but, I can take that and I can apply it. Or, you might find that you like something else. And it's really just trial and error. Do you know what I mean? Like, give something a go. If it works, it works. Happy days and carry on doing it. And if it doesn't work, then discard it. Like, I say to a lot of trainee wrestlers all the time, like they'll ask me for advice and I'll say, hey, look, I'll give you this advice, but don't think that what I'm saying is gospel, because I found that it's worked for me. But if it doesn't work for you, then, don't do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, find your own way. Like, there's not one single way to be successful in this industry. Everybody is different. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've got guys who are, at the top, like look at Roman Reigns. What he does is completely opposite to what, say, like a Kenny Omega does. Do you know what I mean? Like, look at like the Young Bucks compared to, say, I don't know, like, Cody Rhodes. Like, certain aspects might be similar, but everybody's different in their own way, and you've got to find your way of doing things. Batista is polar opposite to Will Ospreay, even though Ospreay might like to think that he looks like Batista. They're two opposites, you know what I'm saying? But they're both successful in this industry. So define what it is that you measure success by, and just continue to apply and adapt. If something works, great. If something doesn't, then move on and figure out. Like, success isn't a straight line, it's ups and downs. And the way I think about it is that the more, like, it's like an elastic band. The further you pull it back, the further it fires forward, right? So you might find that you're at a point where you're low, you can't figure out how to do things, and you've tried what you feel is almost everything. Where it's like, well, okay, but if you've tried almost everything and then you found a bunch of ways that don't work, then you're a lot closer to finding a way that does work than you think you are. But sometimes it's hard to think like that. It's hard to keep that positive mentality, and just making that commitment to yourself. It's like, look, I am going to suffer at this until I find a way to be successful at it, basically.
Yeah, and like I say, it's a long journey. Again, kind of touching back on the 5 points of positivity, we'll call them the 5 people. Russell Brand is somebody else that I've always kind of had an interest in or followed, from like the early stand-up routines to the guy's basically like a British Joe Rogan now, just doing stuff and talking about stuff. I mean, yeah, if you want to look at like a fucked up life or fucked up journey, I mean, if anybody knows Russell Brand, knows his history, like drugs and sex and all that kind of sort of stuff, and now he's just like a fucking guru of knowledge. That's another example for me of it's a really weird journey, but you get there eventually, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, he's had so many ups and downs, and it's been fascinating to kind of see how he's evolved over the years, and from one thing to the next. And like you said, now he's like a British Joe Rogan. He's I love watching his videos. I find them very informative and interesting because a lot of the time they kind of, question a lot of what the mainstream sort of media tends to, try to have you believe in regards to a lot of situations. And it just gives you a different perspective where you're like, oh, okay, that makes more sense why, they're doing things in a certain way or what have you. And I think that nowadays it feels like too many people are kind of quite quick to just disregard people of like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory or something. And it's like, okay, first of all, like, I'm not saying every conspiracy theory is legit, right? Because, there's a lot of them where you're like, that's so bizarre. And it's like so out there, right? But to think that none of the, conspiracy theories would be true, you're like, so you think that the government is just, just shooting their shot, good, honest, hardworking people that have never done anything wrong, and they're telling us the whole truth the entire time. Right, I'll tell you this, as a parent, I lie to my kids all the time, like there's certain things that you don't let them in on, there's certain parts of knowledge, how, if you're controlling a country and industries and what have you, I'm sure that there's corruption at every level, and anywhere that there's money, there's going to be greed, and anywhere there's greed, there's going to be, backhanded deals, but that's a different subject altogether.
Exactly. To go back a few more paces, you're about sort of some guys like 20 years old. I had somebody on a few weeks ago who I didn't realize mentioned Leon Slater is only 8 years old, and just blew my mind. I've seen him a few times. It just seems to work years ahead of his age. But that just kind of showed me just how good British wrestling is right now as well. You've got guys of that age, coming up, and obviously across the board, I think British wrestling is just in a really good place at the minute. I think you guys are absolutely smashing it.
Oh, thank you, man. And yeah, Leon's great, man. I saw him probably just over a year ago show up in Newcastle for North Wrestling, and I think he was in the dark match in a 4-way. And I watched the match and spoke to them afterwards, and everybody who was involved seemed really lovely, and he seemed to have like a presence about himself. He had a lot of potential in him. I don't think I saw him again for a year, and I was like, oh gosh, things are going well for you now, aren't they? And he was like, yeah. he's taken off, and that's the great thing about the time period that we live in. It's like we're at a time where there's so much opportunity, and if you're a young aspiring wrestler, like, it's so much easier now to break out. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's right there. You've just got to be ambitious enough to go for it. Like when I started, Twitter wasn't a thing. There was no Instagram. There was Facebook, but they didn't really play a role in anything. Do you know what I mean? And
we had MySpace, didn't we? That was about it.
Yeah. And that was pretty much it. And yeah, it felt like it was a completely different ball game. And just over time, things have continued to evolve. Things have continued to adapt. And I think that this generation now, like I always think that every generation that comes along stood on the shoulders of the previous generation. So now there are kids that are getting into it that have the knowledge of, say like merchandising and things like that. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, my generation, for example, we had to figure it out for ourselves because the previous generations didn't really do much of that, or if there was merchandising, then it was more so on the promoter side than it was on the individual. Do you know what I mean? Whereas we kind of figured out, like, okay, well, each one of us is essentially a brand, right? And what we're doing is that we're going out there and we're competing for advertising space, essentially, right? Like every person who's in the audience is a customer, and they're there to enjoy themselves. And what's going to make somebody believe in you and your product and who you are over somebody who you're in the ring with, right? And I think now that, like, these kids coming through have so much more of like an understanding of that because it's become the norm. Do you know what I mean? Like, and now guys are making money of just being sat at home, sending out a tweet. You can make a lot of money from doing that and not actually having to go out there and physically kill yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, nowadays you can put up a video on YouTube. YouTube is a huge, tool to
But
build
massive revenue in it. It's
yeah.
a revenue to get eyes on your product kind of thing.
Well, like, look at Logan Paul, right? The guy's never had to like go through the indies. He's never had to, really cut his teeth in this industry. He's just, he has a following. WWE were interested, understandably. Would you want somebody on your roster who has 26 million followers? Yeah, like it's a no-brainer. Like if, say, for example, WWE had the chance to work with Conor McGregor, do you think they're gonna say no? Do you think that they're gonna turn him down because he's not done things the conventional way? Like the industry is forever evolving. Like when I was getting into the industry, it was sort of like early 2000s. So like during the 90s, like it was kind of a thing that you had to, you had to kind of go out there and like learn your craft and, wrestle in different territories and then, sort of eventually work your way up and make it to the bigger leagues. Right. And then there was people who were, say they might have been models or they might have been former football stars that were just going into developmental and then kind of learning that way. Right. Whereas nowadays you've got guys who just put up YouTube videos and they're getting signed. So, be smart with what it is that you do. Like your body can only take so much, right? Like, there's only so much punishment that you can take. And, I'll tell you this, from being 16 years deep, I've had so many different injuries. I'd much rather just have, flatter thumbs from, editing videos or whatever on my phone than, having the injuries that I've had. But, like I said, like every generation is constantly evolving. So I hope that the kids that are coming through now can make the most of that. And, they're inevitably going to change the business for the next generation that comes in after them.
Yeah. I had somebody on a while ago who was on about, it might have been RJ, who was on about like, obviously when he got into it, probably very similar time to yourself. I kind of class you guys as the same sort of generation of wrestlers, like you, Kirby, RJ, Sticks, Nathan, Matt, all those guys. It's like, say you'd have to drive like an hour, 2 hours to get to a school. There's like a handful of schools in the country kind of thing. Whereas there's probably 2 in every town now or something like that. Not all of them good, but it's a hell of a lot more accessible now than it was for you guys back in the day.
Really.
To, the current generation riding on the shoulders of the previous one. Prior to you guys, I think we talked about this last time. I think British wrestling had been in a bit of a slump. Like the world of sport had come to an end. British wrestling was kind of in a flux. And then I think you guys caught lightning in the bottle with like I say Travis. You had all you guys kind of coming through at the same time, and something clicked, and it managed to lift British wrestling back up again. And it's been constant growth since.
It's hard to define because if you think about it, right? So like when I broke in, All Star Wrestling, for example, were undoubtedly the top promotion in the country, in the sense of you could work every night of the week for them, and they were never out of work. I remember they had like 30 dates through the month of June alone, right? Wow. Which is, when you think about it, like they weren't necessarily the most advertised in the wrestling industry, but like as far as an entertainment product, like right. Yeah, you were traveling all over the country. You were doing camp shows, you were doing town halls, you were getting out there. And a lot of the guys who came through on that circuit are now in WWE. Guys like Drew McIntyre, guys like Sheamus, do you know what I mean? Like that's where they first cut their teeth. A lot of the American guys like Tyson Kidd, he came over and he was working there. Like when I first met FTR, was for All Star Wrestling at Butlins. Do you know what I mean? And now they've gone on to be big names. Like I remember one time, I just come back from Japan, and I was told I was going to be working with this guy coming up, and I went and said hello to him, and he was like, "Hey, dude, I've caught like some of your work before. I'm really excited to be working with you coming up." And I was like, "Oh, cool, man," and like didn't really think much of it. Turns out that guy's now Adam Cole. Do you know what I mean? It's bizarre. You know, I remember I first wrestled Drake Younger and Sammy Callahan for All Star Wrestling. Like a lot of the guys who are now big stars in the industry cut their teeth in this promotion, and it was because they could offer you work every night of the week. Do you know, all over the country. But a lot of it went under the radar because it didn't necessarily appeal to a wrestling audience. It was appealing to families. It was appealing as live entertainment. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, wrestling, it's always evolving, you know, and once again, how do you define success? A company like Progress Wrestling, you know, in my mind is probably one of the most successful British indie promotions there's ever been, because they went from being, their first show, I think, was maybe like 350 people in Islington. And then they go from that to, you know, tours of America. You know what I mean? Like no other British indie has done, you know, tours of America all over the country, you know, running, you know, shows over WrestleMania weekender with drawing the capacity that they drew, doing places like Ali Pali, you know, like doing things like Wembley Arena, 5,000 people, you know, being picked up by, you know, the WWE Network. You know, the only other company that really did that was ICW. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, they're both, you know, huge assets to the wrestling industry. And I think that you really have to figure out how you define success, you know. And it's I understand that people saw that how British wrestling seemed like it was in a slump, but I think that it might not necessarily have been in as much of a slump as everyone thinks it was, but it's just continued to evolve, and it, you know, became a bigger deal because of, you know, the way that social media has impacted the industry on the whole.
It wasn't as mainstream. I'll rechange my words. British wrestling wasn't as mainstream as it got to a point. Like you sort of said, when the Progressors, ICWs, PCW in Preston, Red Pro, stuff like that. You know, it wasn't as mainstream and easily accessible, like, you know, for the big shows once a month, that kind of thing. I think that relaunched with you guys.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that. Like from 2015 to 2020 was just such a mad ride that when you look back at it, you're like, this is insane, you know, like what culture comes along and they're drawing thousands of fans on a weeknight, right? Like, you know, companies come along, like I said, like I've said this so many times in interviews, like it was a time where you could make a decent living in the wrestling industry, which I definitely never anticipated would happen, you know, like I didn't think that, especially in British wrestling, like, you know, when I first went out to Japan, I was like, damn, these guys are so lucky that, like, you know, they can just be a touring company and just, you know, go home to bed sleep in their own bed every night. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't see it happening in British wrestling. And then sure enough, a few years later, like, you know, everything took off the way that it did. But, and that just came from a place of everybody being ambitious and just people wanting to put on the best shows that they could, you know, and do, you know, the very best with what was, you know, available.
Definitely. Talking of Adam, sorry, dude.
No, I was just saying I was very proud of what we achieved, and I hope that the scene can, you know, reach a new level of success off the back of that.
You mentioned Adam Cole. Remember seeing you two guys going at it at Tidal. Shout out to Tidal in Leeds. You two guys went at it at the Cockpit many years ago as well. So that was just a nice little name reference. So I just remember seeing you two guys, and then I've not seen much of Adam Cole at that point. And then, like I say, it's amazing who you see on the journey when you go to these indie shows, which is why I'd always suggest wrestling fans go to these kind of shows, because you never know who you're going to see before you even know who they are, kind of thing.
Dude, I look back at some of the matches that I had and I'm like, damn, I wish I could have them again now. Like, I remember having tag matches with like Malachi Black and myself versus the Young Bucks, you know, myself versus Malachi Black versus Sami Zayn, you know, you look back and you're like, damn, like, you know, we were just kids just trying to, you know, break out and make names for ourselves, and, you know, seeing where everybody's gone on to and what they're doing now, it's so it's so polar opposite and bizarre, you know. Like I remember watching Osprey versus Pete Dunne in like a unit in Milton Keynes in front of maybe 150, 200 fans on like a casual Wednesday, and you're like, damn, these guys are now like huge deals in the industry. Do you know what I mean? Like you got to keep your eyes open because you never know where, you know, who's going to be the next big star and where they're going.
That's it. Just got to mention, dude, loving the artwork sort of behind you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a map up here, and this is actually a cushion. But yeah.
Oh, it's a cushion. I thought it was just like kids' drawings on the wall.
Oh no. It's actually a cushion, and yeah, the map up here. My son loves maps. He loves he tells you. He's at a point of his his life where you can really start to see the but I don't even know how to explain it. Like, he's just another level of intellect, right? But he's, the other day he drew a world map from memory, right? And I remember asking him, I was like, do you know what these islands are down here? He was like, no. And I was like, oh, this is Indonesia. He's like, no, that's Indonesia there. That's the Philippines. I'm like, oh, I'm such an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, he's next level intellect. And a story I like to tell people because it demonstrates how clever he is. We were having a discussion the other day. We were like, okay, so the thing that I think that is important as a parent is that you don't teach your children what to think, you teach them how to think so they can make their own decisions, because at some point in life, you're not going to be around to tell them, what to think or whatever, right? So I was saying to him, I was like, okay, so say little gray aliens did exist, right? What animals do we have on our planet that could tell us something, that have grey skin, that could tell us something about the habitat that they're from, right? So we were thinking like rhinos, or elephants, so maybe, it's somewhere warm, or maybe, sharks and dolphins, they have grey skin, so maybe it's aquatic, right? And then he said to me, he was like, well, Dad, have you ever thought that because the human eye can only see between a certain range of colour, it's not that they're grey, it's just that we haven't evolved to see what colour they are because they aren't from this planet? I was like, damn, I'm screwed. Like, what am I going to say to that? I was like, I need to send you to Mensa straight away, get Harvard on the phone, we got to, sort this kid out. And, he's going to be a real asset to the world one day. And, not get hit in the head with a steel chair for a living like his old man.
That's awesome. Any stories like that to do with, the kids, just the pride. I love that stuff. That's what kind of makes me, recharges my soul. So yeah, I love that story. Still into dinosaurs? Still doing the work?
No. We went to West Midlands Safari Park the other day, and he walked around and he didn't recognize the dinosaurs. And part of my, heart kind of like, I was like, oh man, I'm like heartbroken, because he used to be able to tell you every, dinosaur that, you'd see, and he'd be like, I'm not too sure which one this is. But no, now he's into, learning about history and wars and maps, and yeah, he's like a little old man. I don't know where it's it really sort of come from, but no, like my dad was super genius, level of intellect. So I think the genes just skipped a generation and gone to my son.
No, they'll get the. You just got to make sure they don't go to waste, man, and just hone that skill, mold his skill, and send him off, dude, to be awesome. Still got the ice barrel in the back garden.
Every day, man. Yeah, every day. Every day.
Taking it, using it straight after the. We mentioned the Rhino match. I can imagine the barrel got used the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great for anti-inflammation, and it's just good for my soul, man. Like, it has a dopamine release, so you actually feel physically better. But like, the thing that I found, especially during lockdown, was like, I just have to beat the absolute shit out of myself to respect myself, really. Like, I try to do things a lot of the time that that I feel proud of, so that I can feel good about myself and what have you. And doing cold water therapy, like it's trying to rewrite. Like, the thing I found was I felt like I had like an unhealthy relationship with fear, and I felt like that relationship that I had with fear had held me back in a lot of situations throughout my wrestling career. So I wanted to rewire the way that I thought, you know. So during lockdown, I would do things like I would go for a run through the woods by myself in the middle of the night without a torch. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, that fear is still going to be there, but how you react to it can be completely different. You know, like I would just do bizarre things where it would be like there would be a storm, and like where we live in Malvern, like we have these beautiful hills in the middle of the town. So it, you know, it would be a storm, and I'd be like, all right, time for a run. Do you know what I mean? So I put on like these like they're called barefoot shoes, where there's almost no padding on the bottom of them, right? They're more like a sock. And yeah, I'd wear a weight vest. It would be 10 kilos, and then I'd go for a run over these hills, you know, in the middle of a storm. And it was, you know, like it's trying to rewire that voice in your head where, it, you know, rather than giving yourself any excuse not to do something, it would be like, okay, I am going to do this. Do you know what I mean? And I'm going to find every step of the way. You know, I'm going to talk myself into doing it, and that's the important thing. Is like sometimes you can look at a task and you can be overwhelmed by how huge it seems, but then if you just focus on each individual step, before you know it, you get the entire way. Like I mentioned him earlier, David Goggins. He's a former US Navy SEAL, like ultra marathon runner. He's a hero of mine. One of his challenges is to run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours straight. So I thought that anybody who does this is a legitimate badass, right? So one Friday morning, I think I was like, you know what, screw it. I can wake up on Sunday morning, I can be proud of myself for having done this, or I can wake up Sunday morning and I can hate myself for having not done this. So I was like, screw it, I'll give it a shot. And, you know, I went for my first run at 8 a.m. and then 4 hours later, you know, the next one. And before you know it, you're so many runs deep. And I've done that twice over now. The second time, my wife and I did it together, but we did it 2 hours apart. So I would run for 40 minutes, for 4 miles, which would take about 40 minutes to an hour. The first one was like, you know, under half an hour, and then just the more and more you go, like just the slower and slower they get. And she would go and train for 40 minutes. So like I would come home, rest for an hour, and then she'd be out training. So it would kind of distort our sleep, because we, you know, when one of our alarms went off, you know, it would wake the other one up. So like by the end of the 2 days, like we were just exhausted. We were knackered on both accounts. Like I got injured, but I was like, screw it, I am going to finish this whether it kills me or not, you know. And the second time that we did it, we raised money for charity. Raise money for abuse victims, and we, you know, a lot of people contributed to that, and we, you know, really grateful for every donation that we received. And we just, there's just part of the process of just going for it. Do you know what I mean? Like I think we hold ourselves back in so many situations, and like I said earlier, you can worry about whatever it is that you're going to worry about, and 9 times out of 10 those things don't ever accumulate to anything. So just focus on the positive, focus on what could go right, and before you know it, you know, you're so much further along in your journey of getting somewhere, you know, with your life and doing something that, you know, you're happy with, you know, like, you know, like, you know,
for it, basically feeling more fulfilled, happy, and like you say, it's a stream where you get this, you start feeling happy, you start feeling more fulfilled, and it has more positive consequences on other factors. It's like a ripple.
It has an effect through the rest of your day. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you know, the way I think of it is like, if I can go for a run at 3 a.m. in the morning, then, you know, I'm not going to, you know, complain or something when I have to walk to the end of the road to post a letter and it's raining. Do you know what I mean? Like it's it has a knock-on effect when you get back to wrestling as well. You know, it changed my mindset of, because you kind of get stuck in certain patterns, you know, or habits where you think like, oh, things have to be a certain way, or they have to be like this, or they have to be like that. Like, screw it, just find out. Do you know what I mean? Like, try something different and continue to evolve. Like, the worst thing you can be is like restricted by your own, you know, limitations that you put on yourself. Like, you know, don't be afraid to, you know, just find things out for yourself and just do something different and continually evolve.
Definitely, dude. Touching back in with the 1PW thing, obviously you've mentioned you going against Rhino, RVD. Obviously any wrestling fan can make the connection there between them two and the ECW side. don't go on social media much because, as you sort of said, it seems to be filled with people who complain, and I can't seem to filter that out. So, but I did notice Kid Kash has popped back up again, and I had some non so pleasant things to say, obviously on the back of your beating Rhino and RVD and your comments afterwards. I know you don't do the bookings, dude. You mentioned that. But would that be a match you would sort of be interested in putting another ECW, I'm not going to say legend, but another ECW participant to waste?
You're not calling him a legend?
Not in ECW. I'll tell him more of a legend after that. But for me, he came at the tail end of ECW.
Man, your opinion, is, yeah, like Kid Kash, I mean, what did he say? I think he called me a prick, right? He was like, damn, this guy's a prick. Now, being called a prick by Kid Kash is like being called a drunk by the Sandman, right? It's like, gosh, like, okay, do you know what I mean? And, all right, whatever, like, line them up, I'll knock them down.
That's fine. But yeah, just to explain, I'm a fan of Cash's work. And but I kind of tailed off of ECW towards the end, so I know him more from his TNA days than anything else. Yeah. So that's to me.
We'll see if he wants to come over here to 1PW. Again, like I know that he was, a big deal for them back in the day. It would be great. Yeah. See another ghost from the past, and like I said, I'm in my prime now, so I'd be excited to see what goes down.
So besides 1PW, then what's you say you was at a show the other day? What you've been doing besides obviously 1PW? For anybody that doesn't know, where would you?
Just training hard, man. Like, I love training. I bought my wife a golden retriever for her birthday last year. She always wanted a golden retriever with a red bandana. So for her birthday, I surprised her. I took her out to this breeders basically, and we pulled up, and you'll never experience or realize how little somebody trusts you than when you're trying to plan a surprise for them, right? Because it's just like, are you capable? Am I gonna like this? Can you really plan a surprise that I'm going to enjoy? Do you know what I mean? And you're like, I didn't realize you doubted me so much. Do you know what I mean? So we pull up to these buildings, and I hand her this present, and she opens it, and it's a red bandana, and she bursts into tears, and I'm like, inside one of these buildings is a dog that needs that bandana. And it turns out we were looking at the complete wrong set of buildings, so it gave her time to, that we were about to walk into some random person's house. But we found the place that we were meant to go, and it gave her time. It actually kind of worked out better, because if she burst into tears straight away, and if we'd walked in and she'd been crying, she was like, yeah, there's no chance that they're going to give like a dog to us, because they're going to look at her as a blubbering mess and be like, do we trust these people? So gave her a chance to calm herself down and what have you. So we pull up, we go in, she sits down in the pen with the puppies, and one comes over and licks her on the end of the nose, and she's like, I'm having this one. And we took him to these waterfalls that we love going to on the way back, and I don't think he'd ever been in a car before, and then suddenly we're taking him on this, taking him in a car, taking him on a walk, and he's just continued to grow, man. Like, he's huge now. He's just this, he's just absolute beast, and it's a great feeling taking him for a walk, because as soon as you let him off the lead, he's just got the biggest smile on his face, and he's just running around. He's just so happy. Like, we're very blessed where we live. We have a lot of, and we're in the middle of the countryside. We have lots of beautiful walks to go on, and he just loves it. And he's the pain in the ass that you can't help but love. Like, he's absolutely beautiful, and he gets away with murder because you just can't stay mad at him. You're like, oh, I love you. Do you know what I mean? You'll be angry at him 1 minute, and then the next you're like, I want to give you a cuddle and play. But apart from that, just continuing to build my empire and do my thing, and be involved in wrestling, and contribute in whatever way I can.
Definitely. Massive dog fan here. I think you hit the nail on the head there, where they could pretty much destroy anything in the house, and just got to look at you and you'd be like, I'm not even mad anymore. You just give them a cuddle, and that's jobs are done.
Yeah,
So
the other day he decided to tear off some wallpaper, and did bearing in mind this is like the day after or maybe 2 days after we had just wallpapered. So, we just done this really perfect job. It was an intricate design. We managed to line it up. We got it almost perfect. And then he came in and destroyed it. And we were like, and yeah, he knew he was in the doghouse that day. But same thing, you're like, I don't want to be angry because I just want to cuddle you, you little shit. You know what I mean? But, yeah, he's great. He's awesome.
I can't imagine not having just not dogs, but certain just pets in general. Again, I think very relaxing, very just to help you to recharge your soul. Just sitting down, stroking them or playing with them. I just think it helps. Very good to center you, kind of thing. I don't know if obviously you found that with other pets, or if you any pets you've had previously.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're nice just to help you relax.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Like, you can have, you don't, the thing I find, like, I don't have a care in the world when, like, I see my pets are happy. Do you know what I mean? Like, when, they're, you can be worked up and stressed out, and then like 10 minutes later, you've been fuzzing your cat or something, and, suddenly you're nowhere near as stressed, right? Now, we've got 3 cats and we've got 2 dogs. And one of our cats he's either a Maine Coon or like a Norwegian forest cat. He's got like super long hair, but like and it's weird to say this, but he's strangely like a motivation, a huge motivational character for me personally, right? Because this cat is the boss, right? Like, there's our dog Duncan, the golden retriever. He's like 5 times the size of this cat, right? He's terrified of him. He will not put a paw out of place. Like if he goes up the stairs and he sees that the cat's at the top of the stairs, he will stop in his tracks and he will not move. And he will be like, he'll wait for me to like kind of get between them in order to then run around. You know what I mean? Like, and this cat he stands his ground. He puts people in their place. We for Christmas a couple of years ago, I bought my wife a black cat, right, which we called Salem, and she's lovely, and she and our other cat Pirate, that's his name. We rescued him from somebody else. They named him, but it strangely stuck, so we just kept it. So he's awesome. He's very gentlemanly, like if he hears that Salem's upset, like he'll come to her rescue all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like he's such a good, like he's just a good soul, like I don't know if you ever get this where you look at an animal and you're like, if reincarnation is real, like I believe it with this one, because this soul has been here before, right? And he's just an absolute guardian that just, even though he's like smaller than everybody else, he's just ferocious and intense enough that like nobody will mess with him, right? So yeah, huge inspiration for me, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, no, dude, that's awesome. But yeah, you can see like a wisdom in their eyes. Like you say, they've got an old soul. So yeah, probably
Yeah.
it's been around the blocks a few times, and this journey.
And patience is gold as well, because like we'll pick him up and blow raspberries on his tummy and he just has this vacant stare on his like face where he's like, oh gosh, like it'll be over soon, do you know what I mean? And like never really like goes for you or anything. He's just, and it reminds me, I was like, yeah, I gotta be more patient with people. And like, not that like people are picking me up in the wrestling locker rooms and blowing raspberries on my tummy or anything, but just dealing with being with patience and being a good soul.
Yeah, man. But you say that now, I think you're going to jinx yourself at some point in the future match. So I think somebody's just going to blow a raspberry on your belly, and that'll be it.
They
You'll just
best
tap
not.
out.
No. My claws and my ferocious side will come out. I will hiss and spit them and be angry.
I'll sort of to ask, obviously, because it is 1PW month. Obviously, it's awesome to see you there. I think a lot of fans will appreciate as well. Obviously, Vic being there as well, just seeing you two working together. I love it. I love the fact that you two can just go out there, do what you both do, and you do it so well. It's like Vic's got her side of the character, the work dynamic, how you guys work together down. and it comes across very well. I presume she's obviously enjoying getting to come out with you and do what she does on a regular basis as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think she hates working with me a lot of the time because we're the polar opposite of each other. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you know, she likes to have like a game plan going into something. She likes to be very clear and what have you. And I'm very much a like, fuck it and find out kind of person. So like, you know, like she wants to be like behind the curtain, like, you know, 5-10 minutes before, right? I'm, you know, somewhere else doing something completely different. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm probably outside doing jump rope or, you know, running around or realizing I've forgotten something and left it in my bag. And like, yeah, like I know how long the intro to my music is. So I'm like, okay, as soon as I hear that, I know I've got so much time before I can be there. Right. Whereas like she likes to be at the curtain and what have you. So I think it you know, it doesn't help her anxiety because she's like, yeah, my husband's an absolute lunatic. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, and you know, everybody's so much more happier to see her than they are me. Do you know what I mean? Like we get to a show, and if I'm at a show without her, they're like, "Oh, hey Mark, like good to see you. You know, it's Vic here," and I'm like, "Oh no, not today." It's like, okay. Do you know what I mean? Like everyone's always so much more like Vicky, how are we? Do you know what I mean? And like it's like, oh hi Mark. Do you know what I mean? Like so yeah, I think that yeah, people enjoy having her around, and you know, she's great at what she does. Not that she'd believe it, and you know, and of course, I can't tell her that because you're my husband. You know, you have to say that. It's like, yeah, but you know, yeah, but when do I ever lie? Like, you know, you've told me off for saying things so blunt before. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's not like I really hide my opinion. Like, I get in trouble for it more often than not. Do you know what I mean? And put my foot in, and you know, put my foot in it, and yeah, have bad situations. But you know, it's you know. And she's great at what she does, and she just needs to believe in herself a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's easy, isn't it? You know, like this past weekend, I had a couple of shows for Attack Pro Wrestling. We're just getting over what we think we had was COVID because you know we did COVID tests and came back negative, but we've had COVID before and it was you know very similar at least. And in the past week or so, like it's kind of been almost like a cold that has kind of like followed on, and like I went, you know, at Attack, I went up to the promoter afterwards. I was like, I was about to apologize. I was like, hey, look, I'm sorry. I can do for you what I, you know, usually feel like I can. And they were like, what are you saying? Like, you know, you had great performances both night. I couldn't have been happier with how it went down. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I felt bad because, you know, I didn't, you know, you know, I just felt like I didn't have that extra layer of energy that I normally do. And I think that you're just never satisfied with your own work. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, I think when you know, put so much effort into yourself, especially like myself, like I'm a perfectionist, you know what I mean? And like unnecessarily so. And I think a lot of the time that like you can feel like, oh, I could have done this better, I could have done that better. But if everybody else is happy with it, then, you know, that's, you know, really the main thing, you know, like, and I think that it doesn't matter, like any match that I've had, like I could have had the best wrestling match that ever existed, and I still wouldn't be happy with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, I think that that's just kind of like the part of the aspect of the industry is like you're always striving to do better or be better, and you know, you're only as good as your last match, sort of thing. So, you know, you can have a great match, but then you're like, oh well, I've got to do it a second time. Do you know what I mean? And then you know, you're always striving for whatever that next goal is.
Anybody knows me knows I'm a massive mark for Scrubs, and there's a quote. I don't know if you've ever watched it or know of it. This character called Dr. Cox is in the weight room with Turk, and he basically, I'll paraphrase it, but he's basically sort of saying like when he's working out, he's never ever going to be satisfied. He's never going to like himself, because if he ever gets to that point, that's the end of the journey. You know, he's going to keep trying. So he's never going to be happy with his body, or he's never going to be happy with his work ethic. Because once you get that happiness, you get complacency and you stop trying. So sound along those lines.
Fear is keeping that fire alive. It's keeping, you know, that, you know, to keep it burning. You know, you're always striving for whatever's next. You know what I mean? Like it, you know, you can reach a certain height, but then, you know, like WWE is a great example, right? Like if they've been satisfied drawing, say, 60,000 people to a, you know, WrestleMania, then they would never draw 80,000. Do you know what I mean? Like it is constantly, you know, striving for that next goal and continuing to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that with an industry, particularly with what we do, like it's, you know, it's kind of part of, you know, that it's part of the beast. Do you know what I mean? Like that you're always trying to do better than what you did last time. You know, like I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, you know, that golden sort of period of British wrestling from 2015 to 2020. You know, like I look back at it now and I think like, wow, that was such a magical, awesome time where, you know, we're doing these mad shows and, you know, like great wrestlers are coming over and we're doing all this stuff. At the time, we were like, oh, like, you know, like it wasn't enough. Like we had to constantly be doing bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're like, only once you kind of lose something do you realize what it was that you had, you know. And like during sort of like, you know, 2020 and lockdowns and what have you, did you realize you're like, oh man, I just want to be in front of a crowd again. Like I just want to go out there and feel that energy and you know, be in an atmosphere and, you know, go out there and have some awesome shows. And yeah, I think it's, yeah, just constantly just, yeah, like it is, you have to try and sort of be satisfied to some extent, but, you know, not content with what it is that you've done. Yeah. And it's a hard line to walk, man. You know, like you can, yeah, drive yourself crazy, pulling your hair out or feeling like it, you know, what you've done isn't enough. And it's like, well, you know, it's a gift and it's a curse. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a multifaceted. Like it can be, you know, multiple things, you know, in one. Like it's a good thing that you're constantly evolving, but it's a bad thing if you're never, you know, giving yourself at least a little pat on the back of like, okay, I've got to this level. All right, now we move on to the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, very much a double-edged sword where, you know, it's a source of a lot of happiness, but then also a source for a lot of self-assessment or critique kind of thing. So you got that, again, not to the scale of obviously you guys, but again, I do a lot of artwork, I do a lot of drawing, and it gets to a certain point where if I'm working on a piece, I've got to stop and just walk away from it. I'm like, look, it's done. I can't do any more on it. Or if I'm not happy with that one, I'll do something different on the next one. But I appreciate that piece. Like, you know, I'll put it on, I'll openly admit, you know, I'll put pictures on social media just to kind of feed my ego. Just to be like, people like, oh yeah, that's really good. I like that. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm looking back on it. I'm not overly fond of it anymore, but as long as you like it, you know, cool.
Vic's exactly the same. She just, like, every painting she does, gets better and better and better. She just did one of Lemmy from Motorhead, right, which I think has been her best piece yet. And she put it up, and you know, I don't think it got like as many likes as she anticipated that it might, and a lot of people even thought that it was a photograph. And I was like, the fact that people even think this is a photograph is an indication of like how good it is. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, but the same thing, like as soon as she put it up, she felt terrible by it. She was like, you know, I don't know if I like it anymore. It's like, but you've put your heart and soul into this piece. You love doing it. Like, you know, just, you know, a quote that I heard recently that I love is like, the man who loves walking will go further than the man who loves the destination. Right? Because when you do something that you love, like you'll continue to do it, and that will get you so much further. If you fall in love with the journey, if you fall in love with the process, that's more important than you know, loving where you end up. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it will take you further, and it will do more favors for you. Do you know? And if you enjoy doing something, and it, you know, allows you to be creative and it allows you to do something that you're good at and create a skill, do you know, like, then why not do it? Do you know what I mean? Like, I've seen your artwork's great. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I totally understand. Like, you know, it's the same way as like that I look at wrestling. Like, you know, I'll look at a match and be like, I shouldn't have done that, or oh, I should have done this. And it's like you're never satisfied with your own work, but it's, you know, trying to, you know, think, well, okay, well, this was good or that was good, or, you know, just being kind of in love with doing it and not giving yourself such a hard time. Like, you know, if, you know, one great piece of advice that I remember Pac gave me when I was in Japan was, he said to me, some people hate the Beatles, right? You could be the most successful rock band arguably ever. You could be Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You can have museums. You can have, you know, roads named after you. You can have all this stuff, and yet still some people will think you suck, right? Like, look at John Cena, arguably the most successful wrestler ever, And yet, how many people think like, oh, John Cena, he sucks? It's like, well, the dude's jacked, he's tanked, he's got millions in the bank, he's done so much for the industry, and yet still some people don't like him. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's gonna be people in this world that don't like you, but there's people out there that do. So why focus on the negative when you can focus on the positive?
And that, I think, is a very cool place to start wrapping up, because, I don't think we're going to get any more insightful than that. But just to, again, go back a few paces, you say that obviously people happier to see Vicky than yourselves. There's a lot of fans out there that appreciate you both 50-50, just to let you know. So it's you are appreciated as well, dude.
Thank you, man.
So I don't know, do you want to plug your socials? I know, obviously, like
pretty much everything is This Is Haskins. So Instagram, This Is Haskins, Twitter, website, thisishaskins.com. Check out my merch. We've got some sick designs at the moment, plus some awesome tees with a picture of my wife completely nude, covered in blood in the bath. Who wouldn't want a t-shirt like that? So check them out. And if you see us at a show advertised near you, come down, check us out, and don't be afraid to come say hi at the merch stand. We're always happy to meet people and chew your ear off about talking about being inspirational and what have you, oversharing. So come down and say hello, and if you see us, don't be afraid to say hi.
I'm going to get you bombarded with pictures of pets. I'm going to get people to show you pictures of the dog. So if anybody else has got a dog in a red bandana, you can start a red bandana club.
This is the background of my phone. Look at that plum. Look at him.
Sorry for you. Oh, yeah, you could go in, miss it. Yeah, you could have torn off all the wallpaper, and all is forgiven.
Hey, I hate him. He's just so adorable. You just can't stay mad at him.
Right, stay on the line, dude. But I'm just going to sort of say thank you for watching this to everybody else. Hit like, hit subscribe, share the love, and obviously, if you see the Haskins name on a wrestling poster near you, go watch, and you will not be disappointed. I'll see you all very soon.